So hello everyone and welcome to this first CTIS
This
Bitesize
meeting
Talk
is
on user access and role management. My name is Sarah Scales and I'm a Change Management Officer working for EMA on CTIS. The CTIS Bitesize Talks are a new series of events launched by EMA. Each bite-sized talk will cover a specific CTIS functionality, and a CTIS expert will be here to present the functionality and demonstrate it in CTIS, as well as giving an opportunity for users to ask practical questions. We will be using Slido to collect questions for this event, as we do for many of our events. If I can ask Anna, who's presenting, to please go to slide 2, you will see the Slido details. Perfect. Thank you, Anna. So there will be short Q&A sessions throughout this bite-sized talk in between each short CTIS demo. In order to use Slido to ask questions, you can go to www.slide.do and use the event code CTIS Talk 01. You can also use the Slido QR code, which is on screen now, if you want to access it from a mobile device. So I'll just give you all a moment to get Slido up and put in that CTIS Talk 01 code. And I'll tell you just a bit about Slido. So you can use Slido to ask questions, but you can also use it to upvote or give a thumbs up to questions that you like and you would like to see answered. This is very handy for us because it shows us the most popular questions and we can take the most popular questions first. So please do make sure you're using that thumbs up button. And I would ask you to please keep the questions focused on CTIS user access and role management so we can best answer it. We will have more bite-sized talks in future on different CTIS functionalities and other opportunities for you to ask questions. So thank you for listening to my short introduction. I will now hand over to Ana Rodriguez. Ana holds a PhD in molecular microbiology. She has worked in the pharmaceutical industry and at EMA, and is currently the CTIS Deputy Program Manager and CTIS expert with a lot of knowledge in the area of user access and role management. Thank you, and I hand over to Ana.
Hello, good morning to everyone. I hope you can hear me well. I think during today's event, I will give a presentation. I will show some slides on access and user management, and it will be combined with some demo of the system to explain a little bit more in a practical way what I'm going to present through the slide deck. So I will start with my first slide. Here is just to emphasize what is the first step that you need to follow if you want to access CTIS. And the first step is that you need to self-register in our EMA account management system. Self-registration means in practice to get your credentials and username and a password that will allow you to log in the CTIS system. So how can you achieve that? How can you get these credentials? Well, as you can see in this slide, there are two options. You can directly navigate to our EMA account management system, and then from there you can proceed. Or alternatively, you can navigate to our CTIS website, which link is provided here, uclinicaltrials.eu/home. And from here, obviously, as an sponsor user, you will go to your workspace, and in this case is the one highlighted with the arrow in red. And see, you can see from here that you at the bottom have the possibility to register new user. So, and then from here, what it will happen is that you will be navigated to the EMA account management system where you will be able to get your credentials. And what are going to be the steps? So these are more detailed here, and I will show you also through a demo. So if you click here in register new user, okay, then you will be navigated to complete a self-registration form. So you will have to provide some information, complete some structured data fields, provide your email address, and then once this is done, you have completed the several steps in relation to this form. You will receive through the email you have provided a token that you will need to enter to finalize the completion of the form. So once you have entered that token in the system, you will receive automatically, as you can see in point 5, a notification which will contain all the registration information. One important point that you must be aware is that if you have already an EMA account for any other EMA system, meaning, for example, UdraCT or Sport or UdraLink, please be aware that in this case you can skip this first step because you can use those credentials to log in CTIS. So therefore, this is the first step. You have to ensure that you have self-registered in the EMA account management system and you have obtained your credentials, meaning your username and your password. So what happened? Now you have your credentials, you log in the system, your first question will be, okay, what I can do now with my user credentials? Well, what I can tell you is if you have your user credential and you log in CTIS, you will inherit by default what we call the default role. With the default role, you can perform a limited number of activities and in CTIS, and these are highlighted here. What you will be able to do is to update your personal profile. If you see at the right of this slide, at the top, there is a pop-up window. It says personal profile, so you will be able to update that. Then you have my roles, so meaning that from there, obviously, you will be able to view what roles have been assigned to you. But even if you have not been assigned with a role, you will be able to request a role to the administrator of the sponsor organization with you are expected to work. And on top of that, you should be able also to create a clinical trial application, but specifically via what we call the city-centric approach, but never via the organization-centric approach. And you will be asking, okay, what does it mean centric, city-centric, on organization-centric? And I will try to explain that in my next slide. Therefore, as you can see with this default role, you have limited permissions in CTIS. So which means that if you want really to perform clinical trial related activities or in relation to the annual safety reports, you need to be assigned with what we call a business roles. And in any case, I will provide more details later through this slide. So now I want to stop here because I want to give you a short demo on how you can self-register and also to show you what are the permissions that are linked to this default role. So let me then stop sharing this presentation and then I will share the system. First of all, I'm going to show you how you can self-register. I'm logging in our training environment. And as you can see here, when you go to the sponsor workspace where you are expected to work, as I indicated, you have here this option, register new user. If I click here, as you can see, I'm navigated to our EMA account management system. You can see that in the top left of this screen. So, and then I have to complete the registration form. So I have to start entering information. So I will say Ana. This is Ana Rodriguez. I can put an email address. So I choose this one that I have here. Okay, so I have to choose a password. Now I have to enter it is optional, the mobile phone. So I'm going to put my mobile phone. I choose the code from the Netherlands, from where I'm working now. So you have here, this is not related to CTIS, this is related to a different EMEA IT system. So I will proceed and I will click register. So now when you click here, you are navigated to a privacy statement where you are recommended you should read. And then when you have go through it and you have read this statement, then you can agree, ticking here, and then you click I agree, and then you are navigated to the next screen. And here you will have some security questions. As always, the security question is to facilitate the recovery of your password in case you forget. So here I can put whatever I want. Can put here you can change even the question if it's easy to remember other questions. So I'm going to check here, for example, to my pet's name. And then finally, you have a CAPTCHA question that you have to answer. So here you need to be good in mathematics because it's always numbers. So, and then you will click next. And finally, you can see you come here to this confirmation form. It gives me what are going to be my details. So I'm going to be Rodriguez A-A4. Here are my name, my email address that I provided, my telephone number, and then I should receive via to this email address a token number. So from the moment I included here the token number and I click confirm, okay, you will receive another email confirming your credentials, and then please ensure you keep secure in a secure place those credentials that you will then use to log in the system. So as you can see, the self-registration process is straightforward. It's just to complete the form and then you will get your credentials. So saying that, now I'm going to close this window. And then I'm going to show you, now I'm, imagine my credential, I'm going to use the credential of this user. Imagine this is me. I got this user credential, this login, username and password. Now I'm going to log in CTIS. So, and this is how it look like. You don't have any role at all. As you see here, there is a message at the top right that encourage you to record your employer information. And in fact, this is what we are going to do. And I want to emphasize, and please take note of this, that is very, very, very important that any user, when logging in the system, they indicate what is their employer. And by their employer, we mean their employer, not the sponsor organization for which this user are working. We know that the sponsor work with CROs, so a CRO user may be working for different sponsor organizations, so the employer will be this particular CRO, and that is what we expect it to record here. Obviously, if it's a user working in a sponsor organization, then the user will record the sponsor organization. So, but the employer, we expect the employer and not necessarily the sponsor organization. In some cases, it may match, but not in all the cases. Okay. So then, as I said, with the default role, what you can do, as I explained before, here you have several options. On top of the logout, you have the personal profile, meaning that you can update your personal profile. So if I click here, I navigated here to my personal profile. You can see I'm CTUAT255. And here you see in red, there are some hyperlinks where you can access and update your profile. So, and this is more navigated, let's say, to the email account management system that I have presented before. So, and the other option you have is update employer information. And in fact, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to indicate what is my employer. So when you click here, as you can see, you are navigated to a pop-up window that asks you to search organization. Why? Because here at EMEA, we have what we call the organization management system that contains master data on organizations. So saying that, as I said, as a user, you will be obliged to search your organization in our organization management system here at EMEA. So you can use or the organization ID if you know that, or try to type the name of organization. You can complement with some additional information, the city and country. And in this particular case, for example, we are going to assume I'm working in this company that start with test. Okay, so and then what I'm going to do is to search for this organization. So you see, so CTIS interface with OMS, and they will display the organization available that fulfill the criteria that I included here in the name field. So if your organization is not here, then you will be able to create your organization, and for that purposes you can see here this option that initially is disabled will be then enabled to facilitate the possibility of you to include your organization if you don't find it in the results that are retrieved from OMS. So here, what in fact you will do, and I will show you quickly, I'm clicking in the new organization. Let's see. Okay. So if you click in new organization, in fact, what you are doing is to complete a form that will send information to our organization management system. So you will be able to proceed, but at the same time, the organization management system will validate that information. And if everything is correct, they will include it in OMS. And if not, they will come back to you. That's why you will have to provide some details, as you can see in this form. So if I select this one, let's see if it's populated. I have some problems too from here. Anyway, so as you can see here, okay, I think I'm going to close the form. Okay, so you have to complete all these forms. Sorry, I apologize, but because I think I was blocked, I don't know why. The connection is not working as it should be. Let's wait. Okay. So you will have to complete all this detail. Let's try again. So you will have to provide some details at the top, organization detail, organization address, and then you will have to provide an attachment, and you will ask what I should provide here, and is the information that normally need to provide if you register directly in OMS. So because this is a registration in OMS via CTIS, but we recommend you to register organization directly in OMS instead of CTIS, so you can search those when you come here. But in the worst scenario, you can always do it from here, but you will have to provide some documentation that people in OMS can validate and confirm that your organization is correct or not. And if there is any problem, they will come back to you. So in any case, we are going to cancel it because this is just to show you in case you don't find the organization, what is the alternative. So, but in this case, we are going to use an organization that is in OMS. So we are going to search for it. So I'm going to select this one. Okay, and then I'm going to click in update employer information. Okay, now you can see here, it has been populated automatically, the employer name, this organization, and the details. And as I said, this is very important that when you log in the first time, this information is entered in the system because it will help the administrator, as I will show you later, to identify all the users that are working under the umbrella of that sponsor organization and which are the employer of those users. Okay, saying that, so we've seen the personal profile. Now the other option, you can go to my roles. Okay, so here is the screen of my role. As you can see here, you have a general search functionality at the top, and then you have here an advanced search. This user, normally if you click here, by default, you don't see anything, but if you click search, it will come up what roles have been assigned to you. In this case, there is nothing because this user does not have a role. But as you can see here, you have also the option to request a role. So in CTIS, for a sponsor workspace, it works in both directions. It does not apply to the member state workspace. It's only on the sponsor. So it exists the possibility for an administrator, a sponsor administrator or city administrator to assign the role to a user, or seeks the possibility for a user to request the role to an administrator. So in this case, I'm going to request a role. Again, as you can see, every time I'm requested to enter the organization, I'm obliged to search. So here I'm going to search for which organization I'm going to request this role. And now this time I'm going to imagine this user works on a CRO that is called Test Company. And then I'm going to request a role for this company, which is a sponsor organization. His name is Achilles. Okay, so now here I'm going to choose this one, Achilles Test Company. So I'm going to select and add it because I'm going to request a role for this company. I'm going to select the scope specific trial. So you have the option, the scope of the role, as I will explain later, you have the option to select a role with a scope specific trial. So you can execute the permissions linked to the roles only for this trial, or you choose the option all trials relate to have this role for all trials within that sponsor organization. In this case, I'm going to choose a specific trial and I'm going to copy and paste a trial. Give me a second because okay. So, and then I'm going to select the role clinical trial administrator. So I want to be clinical trial administrator for this particular trial, which is under the umbrella of the organization Achilles Test Company, and I'm going to send the request. Now you have always a pop-up window, so that is just to confirm that what you have requested has sense. So yes, it's for this trial, everything is fine. Now I can confirm. And as you can see here, now it appears that you have requested this role. So me as a user 255, I have requested the role of city admin for this particular trial, which is under the umbrella of the sponsor organization at Achilles Test Company. So you can see here which is the sponsor organization. However, you can see here that the employer is test organization. So this is the way the administrator can know to which organization belong the users that are involved in the conduct of clinical trials for that particular sponsor organization. And here you can see the creation date of this record that has been today. Okay, so as you can see, this is another possibility or permission that is included in the default role. And then the other one is the possibility, as I explained before, I go clear clinical trials tab. It's a little bit slow, the system. I don't know it's because my connection, but you can see here, it also sees the possibility to create a clinical trial application via city-centric approach. But for that, it's better that you understand what do I mean by city-centric versus organization-centric. So I'm now going to stop the sharing of the system and I'm going to continue with my slides. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the next set of slides that I want to present it, and I want to introduce the concept of city-centric versus organization-centric. So, but before starting with that, I also want to make you aware of the user management hierarchy that we have in CTIS. and then I try to represent it here. Here, as you can see in the left side, we have this self-registration, which I explained is the first step that you need to follow to get access to CTIS. And then you have three options. You may want to follow the organization-centric approach. That is the one we encourage everyone to follow, and or you have the option city-centric approach, which was more created for academic sponsor that may conduct one trial in their life, and that's why we want to make their life easier and introduce this possibility of this city-centric approach. If you go through the organization-centric approach, that means that you need to register the high-level administrator in the system. And here, this presentation of today is very focused on the sponsor group of users, because as you know, in the legislation, there is another group of users that is the applicant of marketing authorization that are obliged also to submit the clinical study report that are part of marketing authorization. However, we are not going to present that here today, because I think until a clinical study report is submitted in CTIS, it will take still some time, and even is not open the registration yet of this administrator. So the focus is going to be during today and in the sponsors group of users. And in this case, we are going to talk now about the sponsor administrator, that is the high level administrator of this group of users. And this user need to be registered in IIM and not in CTIS. So that means that they will have to go through the EMA account management system, request their role to be a sponsor administrator. They will have to provide some documentation, and then EMA will validate that documentation, and if it is acceptable, then they will assign in IIM this particular role. So then this first sponsor administrator that has been assigned with a role will be able to assign further roles in IIN. So further, what I mean further roles, I mean further sponsor administrators. So it is possible to have more than one sponsor administrator for sure, although we recommend you not to have many and limit it to 2 or 3, so to ensure that there is some backup options. Okay, so once this sponsor administrator has been registered in IIM, then this user with the credentials that obtained through the self-registration process will log in CTIS, and then we'll start the assignment of roles. Then in CTIS, we have two types of roles. We have what we call the medium level administrator, and in this case, we have the clinical trial administrator. And I have to say that, in fact, this clinical trial administrator is a super powerful role, because it's not only an administrator of users, but also this role have mapped the permission of all business roles. So they can do everything in the system, with the only exception of the annual safety report, in which case they will need to have on top the role of the ASR submitter. But I think this is very powerful role, and this can be assigned only in CTIS by the sponsor administrator. And then the expectation is that whoever is CT administrator here then will assign the business roles to other users within the sponsor organization, or working in CROs that sponsor has subcontracted. So therefore, we expect, let's say, a pyramid approach with small people at the top, the sponsor administrator, then a higher number of users with the clinical trial administrator role, and then the big number at the bottom with the business role. So therefore, the administrators' roles, as I explained before, the sponsor administrator are able, the first one that has been validated by EMA can then register additional ones in IIM directly. They don't need to go through EMA anymore. And they can go to CTIS to assign a role or amend or revoke or approve, as it can be seen here in the right side of this presentation. And the same for the city admin. The city admin can work only in CTIS, so only the section B of this slide will apply. And again, they can assign roles to users. It can be the city admin or it can be a business roles. They can amend, they can revoke role, or if they have received a request from a user, as you've seen before, they can approve or reject the user request. Okay, and then as we said in the bottom, we will have all the business users that will be responsible to perform business-related activities in CTIS. And what is very important, again, is to emphasize the role scope, and I will insist on this through my presentation, because as I said, the scope of a role, when you assign a role, you have to indicate the scope of that role. So if the role is all trials, that means that the user can execute that role for all trials within that organization. However, if it's a specific trial, they can execute that role only for that particular trial. And this is a very important point that you should have in mind. Now I'm going to introduce the concept of organization-centric and trial-centric, because this is something that will be applied automatically in the system, and this will be based on whether or not you have registered and sponsored organization in the system. So what happens is, if when you have your credential and you log in, as I explained, you will receive a default role. Okay, so with this default role, you can initiate the creation of a CTA, which the starting point, as you know, probably through Udacity, is the creation of the EU number. So, and when you create the city application, you will be asked to provide the title, and then you will be asked to select the sponsor organization linked to that application. What happened? That the system automatically will check in the back end if that organization that has been selected for this clinical trial application has a sponsor administrator or not. If the answer is yes, the sponsor has already registered a sponsor administrator, this user will not be able to proceed unless this user has been assigned already by the sponsor admin with the role city administrator with a scope or trial. But if that is not the case, this user is not able to proceed and is not able to create a city application for that sponsor organization. And this is why I emphasize that this is the best approach, because it's the most secure one and prevents creation of trials for a particular sponsor organization. What happens if the system does not identify any sponsor administrator linked to that organization? Well, what must happen is that the user can proceed and the system automatically will assign the role of city administrator to that user, but specifically for the application that the user has created, meaning that the user will can assign roles to other users, but only in the context of this particular clinical trial application, and obviously cannot assign roles or have access to information for other trials that other users may have created using the same organization. And this is why, as you can see, obviously the organization-centric approach is the better one, and this is the one that we always encourage. And the trial-centric was, as I said, created to facilitate the conduct of academic trial, and even those academic sponsors that may perform 1 or 2 trials in their life. If you go more than that, please ensure you follow the organization-centric approach. And then if you follow the organization-centric approach, it has some burden on it, and that's the fact that you have to ensure that you have registered your sponsor organization in OMS, in the sport portal, and we provide here the link so to how to access to this portal and where you can find information how to do that. And then the next step, as I explained previously, you need to register your sponsor administrator in the EMA account management system, and for that you have here also the link. Here is just to emphasize what are the advantages and disadvantages of this, but I think, as I explained, if you follow the organization-centric, you will have the opportunity for a centralized management of access and roles. So the sponsor administrator will have a clear oversight of all the users that are involved in trials under the umbrella of that organization and will be able to manage that user. In the city-centric approach, that's not the case, and therefore users will work independently and focus on the specific trials that they created. Obviously, it improves security because it prevents anyone to create a trial on behalf of that organization, which, as I explained, that is not the case for the trial centric, and also prevents the duplication and improve the quality of the data, because in the organization centric approach, as I explained, the first step is to ensure that the organization has been registered already in OMS, whereas in the city centric, even you are obliged to search in OMS, it may occur that the user enter a new organization and then there is duplication. So that's why there are a lot of more advantages. The balance is more positive for the organization centric than the city centric, and that's why we encourage to follow that route. We understand that it's more burdensome because it requires registration of the organization in OMS and requires registration of an sponsor administrator, but I think that at the end you will be benefited by this. And then finally, in case in this audience we have academic sponsors, just to illustrate what will be the consequences. So if you follow an organization-centric approach, here we have at the top the hospital director that obviously may act as someone there may act as the sponsor administrator, and then they can create the U numbers. And then those numbers may be assigned to the different groups or departments within that hospital that are involved in clinical trials. But at the end, there will be someone at the top on the direction that will have an oversight of all the trials that are being conducted under the umbrella of this hospital organization. If you follow the trial centric, as you can see on the right side, there is completely lack of oversight. You will have different services running a trial, and each other will not have visibility of what is happening in terms of clinical trials being run under the umbrella of this particular hospital. So this is just to illustrate, because even in the academic setting, it is important, and we also recommend organization centric if you conduct a relative number of clinical trials on a regular basis. So saying that, I think I'm going to stop now, and I'm going just to continue with the demo.
Yes, thanks, Anna. Maybe do you think we could take just a few questions from the audience before we move to the next demo?
Okay, yes, please.
Great. So yeah, lots of questions coming in. Thanks for that. Some of them due to the video, and we've answered those, and there's a little announcement to tell you what to do there. But moving to the ones about the user access and role management functionality, the first one is it possible to have the same email address for many users? And I suppose this one is asking about shared mailboxes and if they can be users
No,
within
no,
CTIS.
each user has to have its personal account.
Thank you very much, Anna. Clear answer there. The next one is it possible to request a role from another sponsor? Or, for example, can a CRO user request a role from a sponsor?
Yes, any user. As I explained, if you are a user and you log in the system from the area My Roles, you can request a roles. It doesn't matter if you work in a CRO or you work in a sponsor organization. The functionality is there, you request the role, and it's for the administrator to check, yes, this user from a CRO is should be involved in this trial by our contract with them, and then I will approve the role.
Great, indeed. So a flexible approach that also gives the sponsors control there. There was a question around, what's the recommendation about going for the trial-centric, organization-centric approach, but it was a little bit before your most recent presentation, so I think that clears it up about the benefits.
Please, organization-centric approach. That's my message.
Sure.
Leave city-centric to academic, small academic sponsors.
Thank you, Anna. And then there's a question, what does it look like if a single user is a sponsor admin for many different sponsors? How do they switch between the sponsor or no? what actions they're doing for what sponsor. I'm not sure we can show that because it's probably not how
Well,
maybe you can
yeah,
see.
I can show that a little bit, but essentially, as an administrator, when you assign a role, if you are linked to more than one sponsor administrator, you will have a drop-down list. So you will have to choose which is the sponsor for which you are assigning the role. So it's how it works in CTIS. I can show it to you because one of the users we are going to play is from has test. It will be from test company and he also has requested the role from Achilles. So you will see that as an administrator, they will have displayed these two organizations. Obviously, administrators need to be careful. And as I said, that's why we have this pop-up window to confirm, to check, yes, I'm assigning the role to the right user and link it to the right organization, because otherwise you may be in trouble. So it's an important function of the administrators, and you have to be careful for sure.
Thanks. And maybe just one more question before we go into the next demo, and then of course we can take more questions after that. There's a few questions around what role do you need to create a clinical trial, and is it always the sponsor that needs to create the clinical trial as opposed to a CRO?
No, no, I think it's not, it doesn't matter the sponsor or the CRO. What you need is to have a role. And as I explained, to create a clinical trial via the organization-centric approach, you have to be assigned with the role city administrator with the scope all trials. If you follow the city-centric approach, as I explained, the system, let's say, assign the role to you and you become city administrator, but only for that specific trial. And as I explained in the city-centric, we don't have this concept of a sponsor admin. It does not exist, and that's why we call it city-centric and not organization-centric. But probably if I give the demo, you will understand better this concept through the demo I'm going to give.
Great. Thanks, Anna. So yeah, let's go to a demo and then maybe we can take some more questions after that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Please, Sarah, can you confirm I'm sharing the screen?
Yes, correct. I can see that.
Okay, very good. So what I'm going to show you is the difference between city-centric and organization-centric, and I'm going to use the same user as I was before, CTIS 255. So this user, we are going to start with the city-centric approach. So if I click here in new trial, so I was in the tab clinical trials at the top left, and I click in new trial. So here, this is the first step, which in fact it's the creation of the U number, and then it's open the application to start to provide all the information. So I will enter the title. And then again, I have to set the sponsor organization, because again, here you are navigated to, you need to search in OMS if you find the organization, otherwise you can register as a new one. But obviously the first step is search in OMS. You see the new organization is disabled until you have searched. So in this case, I'm going to choose an organization, which is in fact my organization as user. You remember I was from this company test, which has not registered and sponsor administrator. So if I click here in search organization, okay, so now I'm going to search this organization, and this organization, as I explained, has not registered and a sponsor administrator in CTIS, and the system will check that in the back end. So as you can see here, I'm able to create this application. So if I click in create, you see, I have created this application. This is the EU number, as you can see here at the top left. And then you see here are all the areas that I need to complete before the submission of the application. Well, not all of them. There is evaluation, obviously, is more for member states. but it's just to let you know that this is how the application form looks like. Okay, so now, okay, that is fine. I created this trial city-centric approach, but I'm going to show you what happened if you want to create a trial via organization-centric approach. So then I will go here. If I enter the title of my trial test, then I go to the organization. Now I'm going to search for an organization that has an sponsor admin register, which is Achilles. This organization has an sponsor administrator register. Now I select the organization. And then you see, even before I click create, it says you don't have enough permission to perform this action. So I cannot create because this organization has an sponsor administrator. So that's the way it works. So that's why, as I said, it's much more secure to follow the organization-centric approach, because the user needs to be assigned with a role by the sponsor admin, and in particular, the city admin with a scope or trial is the only one that can come and create a trial. Saying that, this is just to show you the difference between the city-centric and organization-centric. I think I'm going to move now to the presentation.
Sure, and Anna, I'll let you move to the presentation so that people can maybe see the Slido details again, but it would be good if we can take a few more questions.
Yeah, for sure. Please go ahead.
Great. So there were a few about, let's say, the difference between an employer and an organization in CTIS. So if I am a CRO or if I'm working with multiple sponsors, what do I put in the employer details section?
Your CRO.
So you
You are the employer of the CRO, because the sponsor organization has subcontracted your organization, which is the CRO, to perform clinical trials. So you are the employer of the CRO, but you work for an sponsor organization, and it's the way we will distinguish that. And I will show also why that is important again when we look at the view of the administrators, and what happens if people don't put the employer. For the administrator, it will be difficult to understand, okay, this user is working for my sponsor organization or is working for a different organization, a CRO that I may have contracted, because we know that many pharmaceutical companies work with CROs and even with more than one. So that's why it's important that they understand who are the user and which are the employer of those users.
indeed, so it can help then the sponsor admin decide who to give roles to and where they're coming from.
Yeah.
That makes sense. There's a few questions about the EUCT number as well. When does it get assigned? Is it only when a trial is approved, or at what point? How do you get a EUCT number?
As I said, that's the reason why, if you follow the organization-centric approach, you need to be assigned the scope of trials, because if the user wants to create a trial, there is no scope to be added to that user because the trial has not been created. So that is why it's mandatory to have the scope city admin with a scope all trials. So you don't need to specify any clinical trial application, so that you can go through the system and create that clinical trial application on behalf of that sponsor. For the city-centric, as we said, is the system. The system is the one that signed the role. So when the user creates the trial, automatically the system create that application and assign the city admin role linked to that particular application to the user.
Okay, yeah, so CT admin scope all trials can create the trial with an EUCT number, and then other people can get roles for that
Yeah.
scope specific trial, or at any point they can get scope all trials. Okay. Then there's a question: is there an option to export user data from CTIS and see the roles assigned?
No, at this moment, no. there is no possibility to download information. You can search within CTIS, but there is no possibility to download the list of users. This is a requirement that is in our pipeline, probably for future improvements, but not at this stage, not in the current version of the system. But as you know, we will continue developing the system, and hopefully in the future that will be an option.
Great. And then there's a question, how can a user know if the organization is following the organization or the trial-centric approach? Is there some way to see that within the system, or how might they know that?
Normally, that is a very good question, because it's true, it's not easy. I mean, you can see by the role, obviously, if there is no, probably it's more easy for EME admin to look at that. For the sponsor, I think it's difficult, and I think this is something that we have observed, and probably we will need to introduce some improvements to facilitate that, because based on the current view of the administrator, I think it's not easy to identify that. We as EME administrators, we can do it, because we can see if for that organization there is a sponsor admin, because we can use the search functionality. But the problem is that sponsor organizations, they cannot see their own role, sponsor admin role in the system. So that's why it's something that we have observed, and probably we will need to introduce some improvements in the system to facilitate this. But in any case, we expect that the organizations know what they are doing. And as I said, if you're an organization that have registered and sponsor admin, all your trials will follow that approach. But I understand in some CROs may follow City-Centric for certain sponsors, small ones, and they may need to understand that. But you can set by the organization. So in the list of users, you can use the organization ID. So you know that for organization, you use the organization-centric approach. You can search for those users and identify those quickly. And we can show that to you later when I go to the next step. And I suggest that we move, because I think I have more demos to give, and otherwise we will not have time, and probably I will answer some of your questions.
Okay, indeed. And yeah, for the next section, it will be the last section, I believe. So we can go through that one quickly and then leave time for the questions at the end. So, okay, thank you, Anna.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, very good. So now here is just to give you an overview of what are the sponsor roles. So the roles linked to the sponsor group of users, because as I explained, in the sponsor workspace, you have the sponsor group of users working and the applicant, MH applicant group of users. But the focus today is a sponsor group of users, and these are the sponsor roles with the sponsor admin at the top, the CT admin as the medium level administrator. But remember, the city admin is a very powerful role, because they have mapped the permissions of all the other roles that you can see below. It's not the case of the sponsor admin. The sponsor admin is a purely administrator role. However, obviously this role, this user, if they need to perform business activities, they can assign roles to him or herself in order to perform those activities. But in practice, the sponsor admin is purely administrator, and then cascade down the workload to city admins, and then the city admins will cascade down the assignation of business roles to other users within the sponsor organization or within other, for example, CROs organization. And as you can see, the business roles are divided in viewer roles, preparer roles, and submitter roles. Obviously, the submitter have the permission of preparer and viewer. The preparer has the permission of the viewer. And I think what they can do is very straightforward. So you have part one viewer. So this is focused on the view of part one, but not the quality part, as you can see here, or anything related to quality, IMPD. So if it's part two viewer, you can view the part two. If you are quality IMPD viewer, you can view information related to the quality of IMPD. If you are a notification, you can view notification, and the same for results. The same concept in terms of preparation. If you are part one preparer, you can prepare part one, but obviously, as indicated, excluding the quality part, because for that you have a specific role that is the quality IMPD preparer. And if you are a part two role, then you will need to prepare part two, you will have the part two preparer. And the same, if you need to prepare notification, you will have the notification preparer. And here we have the submitter roles. The application submitter is the one that can submit the application. I have to say the application submitter is all obviously in terms of permission is like the city admin in terms of business permission. So it has the same permission of the city admin, but not obviously the administrator of users, because it's not an administrator role. And the only difference with the city admin is that the application submitter does not have access to the quality part of the IMPD. Okay, it's like an excluding, is a submitter excluding quality IMPD in some way. So they will be able to view that there is a document there, but they will not have access to that document. So, but therefore they will be able to submit the application. And again, we have this concept of notification submitter that will submit the notification that may have been prepared by preparer roles, and the same for city results, and then the same for ESR submitter. For ESR, we don't have a preparer because it's more straightforward, and then we have just a submitter role. And as I explained, the city admin need to be combined with the ESR submitter in the case you need to submit ESR reports. And here is, I put some notes that if you are working in a small organization and to make things simple, just assign simply the city admin role, and that will be more user-friendly for you that to start assigning roles to many users. Okay, and also I recommend you as starting with the system, you try not to assign many roles, see how it works, and then later when you have more experience, continue with assignation and widen the number of users that may be assigned with roles. And then it's very important to highlight that the profile of the user can be built by the combination of one role. So it doesn't mean that you need to assign only one role to a user, you can assign more than one role. Okay, and then if we move to the next slide, this is just to emphasize the concept of the role scope, because when you assign a role, you have also to indicate the scope. So you have to indicate if this role is for all the trials under the umbrella of the sponsor organization, or is for a specific one. A specific one, as I mentioned, is automatically assigned by in the city-centric approach, as I explained previously. And then here, finally, you have the possibility to view, prepare, and submit. So it explains more or less what are the permissions. So if you are a viewer, what exactly you can do is you can view all structured data. You can download all the documents that have been loaded in the system. If you are a preparer, obviously you have the viewer permissions, because if you need to prepare, obviously you need to view, but also you will be able to, let's say, draft the application, or draft the notification, or draft the study, the summary of the clinical trial results. So you can edit the data fields, you can upload documents, you can save those, you can check, validate, do the technical validation. And in some cases, not in all of them, you can cancel. For example, cancel an application is something that in the context of application, only the submitter roles can do, but in terms of notification or a summary result is different. That's why we keep it here, but there are some exceptions. And then we have the submitter role, that is the one that at the end will press the button and it will say, okay, now I submit my application. It will go to the European database, and this will have consequences because information will be made publicly available at certain point in time, depending on the referrals that you will apply. And there will be other talk sessions where you can participate, and that will explain how to create an application and how to apply a referral. And then you have other permission more linked to the administrators that are the ones that administer the user. And then, again, a reminder, if you are a submitter, you are preparer and viewer. So if It's another way to limit the number of users. So it's if you have a few staff and you want to have a city admin, then you can have a submitter role that can do more or less everything as well. So you don't need preparer and viewer and so on. So, but the system is flexible and offer all this possibility depending on the complexity of the organization. And saying that, I'm going to try now to go to the next demo. So let me stop my sharing. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to log out. And now I'm going to log in as an administrator, and a sponsor administrator of the company I mentioned before, Achilles. So I have it here, in fact. So I'm going to log in because I'm going to assign roles to users that are going to be involved in some of my trials. So here, as you can see, define your employer is very important. I have don't enter the employer here, but it's important that all your users enter your employer information. Now I go to the user administration. You can see, obviously, only an administrator will have available this tab. If you're not an administrator, as you've seen before, you have clinical trials and notice and alert. And this one does not have notice and alert at all because it's a sponsor administrator, is a purely administrator, is not supposed to perform any business activity. So you can see here by default, you can see here that you have by default presented the requests. So people that have requested a role. And you can see here we have a list, but obviously I'm not going to touch the others. This is the one that I created before, CTIT 255, that requested the role to be city admin for this particular trial. So I'm going to approve this request. So how do I approve it? I click here, you see, I select this particular one, and here you have all the options to manage the user. So here you assign your role from here, you revoke the role from here, and then you have approve and reject that relates to a role request. So in this case, I'm going to approve. Again, I will check, okay, this is this user that is going to work for my organization because I'm the sponsor admin, and is going to have the city admin role with a specific trial. And then I'm going to confirm this. So even I have this notice, this role has been already assigned to this user. Okay, so then now what I'm is going to assign a new role, and I'm going to create another city admin role. But in this case, is is the assignment process. Now, before I approve a request, now is how an administrator assign a role. So here in this case, let me, because I have my script and I want to ensure I follow it correctly and I don't miss anything. Okay, so I'm going to select another user, and now is C2AT. Oh, sorry, I was very quickly. So here is where you have the companies. So in this case, the sponsor admin works only for Achilles, but if you have more companies, there will be a list, a drop-down list here, okay? So obviously I cannot assign this role because I went very fast and tried to assign the role when even I didn't select even the role. So I don't know why the system goes very slow. Apologize for that. Okay, let me cancel and start again. Okay. You see automatically because I'm the sponsor admin, by default, it appears my company. But in case of a CRO, as you said, you may have a role for different companies, city admin roles. So then here you will have a drop-down list and you will choose from that list. So that's why you have to be careful that choose the right organization. Here you have the list of roles. And in this case, I'm going to assign the city admin role. And then I'm going to assign the scope, all trials. Okay, so if you choose the scope specific trials, then you are obliged to enter the EU number here at the top right. But in this case, because I've chosen the scope all trials, then I can proceed and assign this role. Again, you have the confirmation pop-up window that will help you to check. I didn't show that, but you have also the option to select the period of authorization. So you can put 1 year, 2 years, 3 months, whatever you want for the particular roles. I'm not using that, but just to let you know that that is possible. And this is what works when we use the amend functionality.
Anna, just to mention, we're almost coming up to 3:15, so if we can wrap up on the demo side and take some more questions before we close, that would be great. So if you want to quickly show anything else, and then we stop.
Yes. So it's just to show you quickly. These are the roles assigned. So I can use the advanced search. Sorry, because I think the system goes a little bit slow. Okay. Okay, so for example, I can say here, show me what are the roles that I have created today. Be careful because here by default it appears as requested roles. So, and I want to show approved roles. Okay. So, and then you can see
Anna, shall we already go to questions? I think there's been a lot shown today and a lot of good information given. So
yeah. So let me because it has been changed by again to the. I think the system is. I probably it's because of the connections through the WebEx that is going very slow. So what I wanted to show is how I can also amend the roles and okay, so you see here, sorry, apologize, it's going very slow. But you see here, this is the ones that I approved today, 255 and 256. One is the scope or trials, one is the scope specific trials, where it's indicated. Here you can see that this user is working for test company, whereas the other one is working with Achilles test company. Okay, so so that's why this is information that is very important for the administrators, as I explained it. So here you will ask what means amend. So amend role is to, in fact, to change the date. So the authorization date. So from 24th of February, then I can put whatever date I want. So I'm going to choose August and then done.
And I would suggest that we now go to questions to make sure we have enough time. But thank you for showing that amend role functionality as well.
Yeah. Can you give me 1 minute, Sarah, because I would like to show them also how to revoke the roles, although it was mentioned before. But if I want to revoke a role, then I can select here. In this case, this is a requested role because it's what is shown by default now. but you will select it, and again, you will have here the possibility to revoke the role. So these are the key functionalities of the administrators, and then I give the possibility for questions.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. It was very nice. Great demo. So there have been a number of questions around what exactly the sponsor admin can do. Some people have said they don't have the notices and alerts tab as a sponsor admin. I think you've already covered that a bit in that really the sponsor admin's role, well, if I understand it correctly, is to administer users. Is that right?
Yes, it's a purely administrator. They don't have any business permissions, so they are not expected to perform any business activity to create part one, part two, quality. No, this is a purely administrator. They can only manage users.
Sure. And again, I think it's been covered, but just also to mention that you can build the profile of a user with multiple roles. So a person could be
Yes,
a sponsor admin
yes.
and a CT admin and create
Yes,
those.
yes. As you can see here, when you go to assign your role, you put one user, then you can click here, add another role, another role, and another role. So what is the difference? If you have a scope all trials, the user has the scope all trial, you assign it one and then you forget it. However, if your user are going to have the scope specific trials, if they have a combination of role, you have to go role by role and assign the U number. This is an improvement that hopefully we can introduce in the future, and we can assign to the same user several trials in one go, but at this moment it's not possible. Okay, so but
Sure.
you see, you can add more than one role one by one after the other.
Great. Thanks. Then there's a few questions just about, what is IAM and what's the difference between OMS and IAM. So at a high level, if you can address that, Anna, that would be good.
Yeah, as I said, the EM account management system is the central point at the agency to get access to other systems. So to get the credentials and obviously to give access to someone to access an EMEA system, you need to provide some documentation that we can validate, and we can see, okay, this is a reliable user that should receive access to the system. Otherwise, we will reject that request. So EM account management system is for registration of the user and to get the credentials to access CTIS. OMS, as I explained, is an organization management system. So it keeps information on organization, and it keeps master data. And this is to ensure that the quality of the information about the organization is the correct one, and we prevent using for the same organization different set of information. So it's, as I say, it keeps master data in relation to organization. It's a separate system.
hmm Thanks, Anna. So yeah, OMS for organizations, EMA account management, which we also call IAM sometimes, is for users. Then there's a question here, again from a while ago, so maybe it's already been answered, but once the high-level administrators is assigned, can a person with a default role create a clinical trial application?
So, sorry, can you repeat the question,
So
Sarah?
it's around, can a person with a default role create a clinical trial application? But I think what we've seen is it is clinical trial
Yes,
admins.
yes. As I explained, if a person with an NFL role can create a clinical trial application, but exclusively via the city-centric approach. So meaning that if that user select an organization that have an sponsor administrator, will never be able to create an application, because if there is an sponsor administrator, the system obliges to follow the organization-centric approach, and you cannot proceed. But if you follow the city-centric, so there is no sponsor administrator register for the organization that you have selected as a sponsor in your application, then you can proceed and create the clinical trial application. But I already indicated the disadvantages of that route, and therefore I insist and I encourage you, please use the organization-centric.
Thanks, Anna. Then there's been a few questions around who can see IMPDQ data and who can see RFIs related to IMPDQ data. So can you comment on that?
Uh, well, yes, quality IMPDQ data can be viewed obviously by the city admin because they have all the permissions, and then by the quality IMPD preparer. these are the only roles. The other roles, they cannot view quality IMPD related information. So CT admin and quality IMPD preparer.
Great.
Perhaps if there is a few minutes, I can show you an example of what they can view or not, depending on their profile.
Okay. Let's see, as we have many questions, but I believe there would also
Yeah.
be information in the training
Probably in
materials.
the next talk we can extend the timing, because probably I think it will be useful for your users
Yeah.
to understand. I think this was the first time, but it seems that there is a lot of interest, so perhaps we can extend it in the future.
Yeah,
We
for
repeat the
sure.
session.
There's a lot of engagement, and we appreciate all the questions coming through. Okay, there's another question about how many CT admin roles can be available per study. Yeah, is there a
It's up.
limit?
There is no limit. There is no limit. As we said, there is no limit of the sponsor admins, for example. But again, we recommend to limit the numbers, because let's say these are the super powerful, although they don't have business permission, they can assign roles to themselves, and they are the starting point in the hierarchy. So, and the same for the city admin. You can have several city admin, and in fact, we recommend always to have at least two. I would recommend two, the main one plus a backup, just in case that person is on holiday, is on leave, then the other person can act. But there is no limitations.
Yes, and always good to have backups, of course. This is a bit of a simple one, I think, to answer, but can CT admins with the scope all trials see each other's clinical trial applications?
Yes, yes, that's why they have a scope all trials. And in fact, the city admin all trials, because they are an administrator, they will have the visibility of all users. So even if they did not assign the role to that particular user, because imagine there are two admins, one admin assign roles to one user, specific trials, and the other to the other one, they will be able to view all the users linked to that organization. In fact, they will have exactly the same view of the sponsor administrator. The only difference is that the sponsor administrator can revoke the role of the city admin. However, the city admin will never be able to revoke the role of a sponsor administrator. On the other side, the city admin, if it has a scope a specific trial, they will have only visibility on those users linked to that trial. So there is a difference in terms of visibility, depending on the type of administrator, if the scope is all or if the scope is specific.
Very clear. Thank you, Anna. Here's an interesting one, and I don't know if it's really a CTIS question, maybe more of a clinical trials regulation question or a national requirements question, but maybe you know based on the information that you have to submit to CTIS. Um, if the sponsor grants a submitter role to a CRO, is a power of attorney required?
No, no. It's not required in any power of attorney. No, as I said, that's why we have created this hierarchy in the system. We EMA validates the high-level administrator, the sponsor administrator, and then the sponsor administrator is the responsibility to decide who are going to be assigned with roles in the context of trials under the umbrella of that sponsor organization, and therefore cascade down the permissions to city admin and the city admins to the ones below, to normal users that will perform in practice the business activities. So there is no need for power of attorney. I think this is more working outside the system and according to your contractual arrangements with between a sponsor and the CRO.
Thanks, Anna. And another one that I think might be a bit simple to answer, but do all sponsor administrators have to register in EMA account management or IAM, or only the first one has to register in that system?
Only the first one. As I explained, only the first one registered and is validated. And when this is validated and approved, that one, then in IAM can approve further sponsor administrators. But in IAM, as I said, the sponsor administrator role is a role that is assigned in IAM and not in CTIS.
Sure. And then there's a question around, if a sponsor administrator leaves the company, how can a new sponsor admin be assigned? But as you mentioned, it's the case that you can have multiple sponsor administrators, and
Yes,
it's probably
that's
always
why.
just.
Yeah, that's why I emphasize that it's important that you have at least not many, but two. because then if someone leaves the company, you have the other one. So you don't have to go back again to EMEA and request this role.
Mm. Here's an interesting one. I don't think I asked it already, but stop me if I have. If an organization chooses a trial centric approach and wants to change later to the organization centric approach, is that possible? And are there trials
Yes.
switched over as well?
Yes, yes, that is possible. And from the moment you change, you will have the oversight of other trials. But again, it's better you start with the organization-centric approach from the first moment for your first trial. That's my recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. I'm just scrolling through to see if there's anything else. We seem to have addressed a lot, and thanks for all the answers you've given. Um, Yeah, there was a bit of confusion around is the organization the sponsor? So when we talk about an organization in
Yes,
CTIS, we're talking about the
yes. When we
sponsor.
talk, well, in this case, yes, when we are talking organization-centric approach, we are talking about the sponsor organization. But the concept of organization and the searching in OMS is a functionality that is across the system. For example, if you are going to complete your application form and you need to enter your investigational site, again, you need to search those in OMS. So, or are you seen if you need to enter your employer, you need to search an OMS. So in this case, the organization you are looking for is your employer, or in the case in the investigational side, the organization you are looking for is the investigational side. In the context of user management and this concept of organization centric, obviously we are referring to the sponsor organization. Yes.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, lots of questions answered. Thanks again for your input. I think I will just move to close. Anna, would you be able to just share the presentation with the final slide as it has a few important details there?
Yeah, let me go to
Thanks.
this.
And as you're doing that, I'll just say were also some questions around will the presentation be shared? Will a video recording be shared? And the answer is yes. The presentation and the video recording will be available on the EMA webpage where you found the original event and the video screen to watch on. And you can follow or subscribe to the CTIS newsletter. And there's also a new thing we're doing called the CTIS Newsflash on a more regular basis. And we will announce in those materials when when the recording and the presentation is available. And there is some detail about how to sign up to the newsletter on the final slide, but you can email ct.communication@ema.europa.eu to sign up to that newsletter.
I don't know, Sarah, if you want to say a few points in the presentation, we have included this concept of user personas. If you want to say a few words about this, because we added this slide more for information, and I don't know, you want to say a few words on this. I'm trying to share the presentation, but
Sure, no
I'm
problem.
thinking I'm having problems.
Okay. I mean, I can just say anyway, we do have user personas, which can give you an idea of how to build profiles of user roles for different kinds of typical people or users who will be in sponsor organizations, CRO organizations, academic and SME organizations as well. So they can be useful, and you can find the CTIS user personas on the EMA website. So you can have a look at those. And there's also the sponsor organization modeling document, which can be useful as well. But let's just for time move to the last slide, and I can give you some final closing information.
I'm not sure. Can you be my screen?
Yes.
Because I'm okay. Let me go because I'm having some. The system is. I think the connection is not the best today
It's always the case
because
when
it's
you want
very
to do
it's
a
very
demo.
slow. It's very slow from my side. So.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Anna. We can see that now. So just some housekeeping things. First of all, thank you very much for attending this first CTIS Bitesize Talk on user access and role management. We have a post-event survey, again, on the event page where you found the video for this event, where you can share your satisfaction with the event, anything we can improve upon as we continue with this event series. So that will be just below the video box, and the survey should be open now for your feedback. A recording and presentation will be available, as I mentioned, and we will announce that in the CTIS Newsflash and newsletter when it is available. The questions submitted will be used as inputs for training and support materials that EMA develops for CTIS. We will not be releasing a specific Q&A document based on this event, but we will use it as inputs for our general training and support materials. Then on to some next events by EMA on CTIS. We have a sponsor end user training program, which runs regularly to give a more in-depth view to sponsor end users of CTIS and how to make best use of it. There is an end user training program being run next week on the 1st of March and on into the week, and another one running starting on the 5th of April. So if you type into the EMA search bar on the website, sponsor end user training program, you will find that. We also have the next CTIS Bitesize Talk on the 23rd of March, and we have a next one in April as well. I will actually just open up a poll in the Slido, if you're still there to answer it, which asks about the next subjects that we were going to cover in the next talks, which were the initial clinical trial application in March and modifications to the trial application in April. So we'd like to know if you agree with these themes or if you'd like something else covered. And I see some inputs to that already, so thanks for that. And we will also, just in a moment or two, open up another poll which asks, would you like to see any other themes covered? So thank you for that. I'll open up that poll in just a second, but at this point, I just want to say thank you again for your attendance and have a good day.